And if you joined a little late, it's completely fine. Recordings will be available. This event has been so long in the making, and we're so glad it's finally here. We're finally presenting it to you. And this is the third and final panel, so we really hope you enjoy it.
Okay, and this event, we do want to say just straight off the top, it could not have happened without all of you. This whole event has first and foremost been proof of Lock Nation's love and dedication to the books, to the show, and to each other. So thank you so much for joining us today.
So we have quite a lot of guests for this particular panel, and without further ado, we're just going to introduce them. We have like such a marvelous roster, and they're all waiting. So let's jump into it.
All right. Firstly, she is the screenwriter for episodes 2, 5, and 6 of Lockwood and Co. She is the one responsible for some of everyone's favorite scenes. Please welcome Joy Wilkinson.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Hi, Joy.
Hello.
Thank you. All right. Next, we have the senior executive at Complete Fiction Pictures and the script editor for all 8 episodes of Lockwood and Co., Bradley Down.
Evening, everybody. Pleasure to be here.
Hello. Pleasure to have you here. Okay, and finally, we have the head of TV and film at Complete Fiction Pictures. She is the executive producer of Lockwood and Co. And rumor has it that the existence of the show started with her and a dream almost a decade ago. Please welcome Rachel Pryor.
Yay.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. Very excited.
Wonderful.
Hello, Rachel. We're so excited to have you. And I seem to be getting, I can see someone else has snuck back into our panel, and I think nobody will complain because, you know, he's the one who started everything, started the fandom, and you just said goodbye to him about half an hour ago. Please, everyone, welcome back Jonathan Stroud.
Yay.
Hey, hi again. Back again.
Hello, welcome back, Jonathan.
Nice to see you again.
We are all
wonderful.
We are all so happy you're here. And, you know, just briefly so that the audience is acquainted with all of your work, especially those who are not really into TV and film or who are not really adjacent to that scene. Could you all please one by one introduce yourselves and your role in regards to the show in the same order? So we're going to start with Joy, then Bradley, then Rachel, and then Jonathan.
So I'm one of the writers. I was brought in at the very beginning when Rachel and Bradley were crewing up the writer's room. So I was in a writer's room with Joe and Ed and Rachel and Bradley, evolving the ideas across the whole series. And then I wrote the outline of the whole series when it went into Netflix. And then I wrote episodes 2, 5, and 6, many drafts of until it went into production.
Yeah.
Okay, Bradley.
Yeah, so I am, as you already said, the script editor on the show, but I also work alongside Rachel at Complete Fiction. So there's so much I could say, but I was very lucky, basically, because I got to be there for the whole life cycle of the show from day one, when Rachel first mentioned the books to me, having already looked at them years ago. I won't steal her story, but through to those days in the writer's room, as Joy mentions, and then into sort of further development and into production. I was very lucky to be on set most days and following it all the way through production as well. It's quite a broad role, but one that I enjoyed a great deal.
Okay, Rachel.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I just need to say that first and foremost. So I'm Rachel. I'm one of the executive producers on the show, together with my partner at Complete Fiction, Naira Park. What does the executive producer do? I guess they are the ultimate decision maker, really, on everything on a show, a sort of manager, if you like, everything from the sort of creative, from the scripts across costume, hiring, firing. No one was fired. Yeah, that was my role on this show. Yeah.
Amazing. And Jonathan, would you like to explain your role on the show as well?
Well, I mean, I'm really here under false pretenses in some ways, because I was having handed over my baby to these wonderful guys at Complete Fiction. My role really was to sort of be on the sidelines as a consultant. So I would talk a lot with Rachel and Brad over the years about all kinds of stuff. I mean, I looked at scripts, but mainly it was kind of just chatting about little problems and questions that came up from time to time. I was there to sort of throw my hat into the ring and give some advice, which they could use or ignore as they chose. So it was a great pleasure to be there on the sidelines cheering them on.
And you're starring role, Jonathan. You forgot your starring role.
Oh, did I? Oh,
Well,
yeah, it's true. I was a very, very important acting role as well, of course. Yes.
Oh, yes, the star of the show, really. I mean, we didn't look at anything else, honestly. Could have just watched that bit and go home.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you all so much for being here today, especially Jonathan, who's giving us not 1, but 2 hours of his time. We'd also like to give a shout out to Ed Heim, one of the writers who sent us a lovely email, who really wanted to be here today. Unfortunately, couldn't due to personal commitments, but he also seems like an absolutely wonderful person. So we want to give a shout out to him as well.
We have so much love for all of you, for all of your work. You're giving up some of your Saturdays, like Zoe said, some of Jonathan's giving up like more than 2 hours, I think, at this point, for to speak with all of us and, just to learn more about how the show was made, the behind the scenes process, everything. One of the major things everyone always talks about is how much love has gone into it. And you can see it in every step of the way. And so getting to learn more about that process is really, really lovely.
Absolutely. And before we begin the interview officially, just a brief breakdown, the agenda of what the panel is going to look like. We've dedicated the first section of the panel to an interviewer-led discussion with Ifa and myself. And we've curated these questions and have some questions that were submitted by the community as well.
Mm-hmm. And then the second part of the panel, what we're going to do is we're going to be bringing on audience members, so they may directly ask questions in the last 20 or so minutes. And just a general note to the audience members, if you've been here since the first panel, you should already know this, but the Q&A portion at the bottom, it's not to ask questions from the panelists. Those have already been pre-approved, pre-decided. That is just in case you're having any technical difficulties. Our moderators are online in the chat. They're ready to help you out. So use the Q&A portion for that, not to directly ask any questions. Now we can just begin.
Wonderful. Let's get started. All right. Our first question for Rachel. We've touched on this a bit already, but in a previous interview, we learned that you waited many years to obtain the rights to adapt Lockwood and Co. What was it about the books that originally spoke to you?
Well, I think probably what spoke to all the fans of the books too, which is that you were just very immediately presented with an extraordinary concept, extraordinary, detailed, thoughtful world with rules that were really sort of clear and easy to kind of latch on to. But principally these sort of 3 characters at the heart of the story that I just sort of instantly fell in love with and felt would really kind of make a compelling trio to kind of follow over the course of a series. I mean, at the time there was 1 book, it wasn't published when I first read Scream Staircase. I had no idea really what the plan was, but I just fell immediately into the world of Portland Row and the universe that Jonathan had so wonderfully created. And I think it was just the humor and the warmth, really, so much warmth in this world, which is something that both myself, Brad, and as a company, we're just always gravitating towards. So, that's as succinct an answer as I can give, really. But, if you know, we've all read, right, and watched, so we get it.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And can I ask you all, I mean, I agree. That is absolutely everything you said, 100% agree. Just, sort of as a follow-up to that, for all of you, can you, set the scene? Tell us the moment that you learned that you got on the green light to give this, to create this adaptation.
Oh, well, look, I'll start a bit because it's sort of, well, I mean, it was a bit of a 2-stage process. So the first thing was learning that Netflix wanted to pick up the books to develop them. So that was the first step, really. And we had such an enthusiastic team of creators at Netflix when we shared the books and Joe Cornish's original pitch and vision for the series. And then we sort of worked away in a writer's room with Joy and Ed and Karen and Joe and obviously Brad, and even Jonathan at one point came in to see us and give us his little talk, brought the whole kit in, which was really exciting. So we worked away on the first 3 episodes actually in that sort of development phase, and that was sort of early 2020. I think we sort of had a writer's room in January of that year, and then it was, I mean, scripts take a little while. You obviously want to make them as great as you can be because you got one shot for someone to say yes. So I think it was in May of that year that we sort of finally heard from the team at Netflix that they wanted to actually go ahead into production.
Yeah.
Then we waited a bit, didn't we, Brad?
We had to wait a bit because, obviously COVID reared its head at that point and, set things back ever so slightly. But the benefit of that really is it just gave us that extra time to really delve into the scripts more and to work with Joy and Ed and Cara and Joe, just to get them to a point where they felt so well crafted, but crucially, as I'm sure we'll touch on in a lot of these answers, to a place where they felt like they retained all of the magic and DNA of Jonathan's world and characters that he'd created. So yeah, we had to wait a little bit, and production is one of those things where you have to just sort of embrace the moment that you're in, because there's never that one definitive moment. There is like mini victories all along, and the green light was an enormous one, but then of course it becomes the challenge of getting production rolling and the reality of having to get this show together and approaching a deadline that is sort of fast coming towards you sets in. So you learn over the years to try and enjoy the moment you're in. Although I will say that Lockwood and Co spoiled us, because it was the first TV show we made as complete fiction, and for a while it made us sort of labor under these false pretenses that every show would go from writer's room to green light in the space of 5 months, and that doesn't happen, it turns out.
It's I think the reason why this show, clearly everyone who has watched it over time, more and more people are watching it, and they are all saying that it's such high quality, and it's got that humor, it's got that snappy dialogue, it's got everything that, you sit down, you watch it and you're like, gosh, I want more. So I think the scripts are an integral part of that. So if you had more time to perfect them, like you said, I think you really got all the details in, you got the meat into all of that, no matter how much time I think you guys spent with it. It was amazing, but excellent job. Those first, I can say personally, I was hooked in the first 5 minutes. That rarely happens with shows. So, awesome job.
You got me in about 30 seconds. And yeah, I was going to say something similar, like that first opening scene, I was already in, but yeah, the passion behind the script, the care that was put into it really comes through. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
So along that line, they say because it's a book to screen adaptation, so this is one of the best book to screen adaptations in recent years, and especially one of the best some of us have ever seen. And in a media landscape where there's this pressure to reinvent stories as you turn them from a book into TV or movie, into a visual medium, basically. So during that adaptation process, what was it like? How did you ensure that the essential materials, the essential heart of the story would be maintained? Because again, they're a near perfect adaptation. Anything you changed, it was for the better. So I think we all really want to know how that process was.
Joy, why don't you jump in a bit on that?
I was thinking about it, and I think it comes down to the what you were just talking about the heart of it and capturing it in that first moment, really, which is the same effect the books had on me, where you just instantly fall in love with Lucy and you're with her, and then as Lucy you fall in love with Lockwood. And I think if you have that core of it, you can actually change quite a lot around the outside, and people almost don't notice. Like it surprises me now when I go, oh, Joplin wasn't a woman in the book. We changed things quite fundamentally in some ways, but because the core was there and the intention was there and the characters had all that integrity and we loved them so much, we didn't want to change anything about Lucy, Lockwood and George and their mission and that world. You could actually change things for TV around the edges as much as you needed to. And again, it was only ever because the thing in the book wouldn't quite work on screen. So we would just find a way to represent things visually, and the lore for people who hadn't read the books, that had to be so clear what a ghost will do, if it touches you, it will kill you, and so on. So yeah, I think we changed more than you think, but because the heart of it was intact, because we all loved it and didn't want to use it for our own ends in any way, then it was all possible.
That's right. And we had I don't know if this has come up before, but we had a real mantra in the writer's room, but it continued into all of the development really after that, which was that if we ever hit a sort of stumbling block, as happens quite a lot with scripts, the mantra was look at the books and go back to the books. And chances are Jonathan had already sort of figured it out for us, or at least could untie that knot for us that we'd come across. So yeah, I think it's exactly what Joy says. And I think there's also something about having utter confidence in the world that you're presenting and making it the confidence that it's lived in. So many of these stories, often you join them at a point where the big change in the world is happening live. So you're experiencing it as it's bedding into society. But of course, one of the wonderful things about Lockwood and Co is that it's decades in already. And so characters in that situation would not sit around and talk about the reality they're in, because none of us really do that. So in a way that was sort of presented a challenge, but I think it was also an opportunity in that it meant that we could just try and have that confidence of letting the world talk for itself. And as long as we sort of tried our best to render it on screen and give people the details, you just have the faith in the audience that they're going to buy into the adaptation, really.
And I think, just to echo what Joy and Brad are saying, there's a sort of fundamental DNA at the heart of the material, the heart of the books that Jonathan wrote, that we found it really easy to extrapolate from. So if we needed something beyond what the books had already given, it was actually just a really fun, creative exercise to imagine what those additional elements might be. And tone was something we talked about endlessly, wanting to get right. That doesn't just exist in the scripts, that goes through casting, that goes through production, design, lighting, every aspect, music, rhythm of editing, everything, and getting everyone sort of on board what the sort of overall tone of the show was going to be, and feeling that had this sort of fundamental thread back to what Jonathan had created. That, as Brad said, we just felt like we were living it. It was under our skin, and we just knew. Always we would know when we sort of like try something out in a script, and we would just instinctively know we'd gone too far left or too far right, too dark or too silly. And, Joe had a sort of rule for us all when we sort of first sat down, which was that we wanted to treat everything that was happening in the stories and to these characters, to these young people, with complete respect and with truthfulness. So, if somebody is hurt, or if someone's in danger or in peril, if someone is grieving, we honor that and we write it from a place of truth, because that's what Jonathan does in the books. And I think that's, sort of fundamental to an audience connecting with characters, and believing that the world is real, believing that ghosts are out there, believing that these young people are on the front line of fighting them. So that sort of tone between the dark and the light, the warmth always being there, and just telling the truth constantly was a way that we kind of held on to what Jonathan had created, I think.
That's absolutely wonderful. And I think some of the ways that you said that you guys wanted to keep the heart and really immerse the characters, start where the story was starting, not at the start of the problem. I think that was really brilliantly done, especially when it comes to the intro of the show. One of the first things I noticed was, oh, this intro is telling me something. It's not just music and flashy names on a backdrop. It's actually telling me some key information vital to the story. And I think all of those details and the detail that you added is one of the reasons why everyone keeps going back and they keep noticing details in the show, background details, absolutely everything, dissecting everything the way we dissect Jonathan's books. And then we just go, oh, wow, this is there too. Amazing.
Yeah.
Certainly. And some of what you said really touched on a bit what William and Oliver were talking about earlier, was just the consistency of the tone across the entire medium. So from the page all the way to the lighting, the filming, everything like that. So that's really interesting to hear.
Mm.
Okay. So this question is for Bradley, but if you all have any other thoughts, please feel free to jump in. So things like Lockwood getting ghost touched and, the first in the screaming staircase, those didn't make it into the final version of the show. Were there any other scenes or details that were cut during the script editing stage before filming? And that question is from Lena, one of our moderators.
Great, thank you, Lena. Well, to start with the Lockwood piece of it, the ghost touch element, there's no sort of single answer as to why it never made it into the final cut. I don't know how much everybody knows, but we did film that, and it was originally scripted, and like I say, we had a lot of fun working with our makeup team to figure out what the ghost touch would look like, and the descriptions are so vivid in the book, but it was a lot of fun figuring out that sort of dark spidering on the skin. I think as time went on and we worked our way through successive filming of the blocks and into the early edits, one of the things we touched upon earlier was just like trying to get that clarity of the rules of the world. And something that was so crucial, I think, to buying people into the jeopardy of this story, which is so integral to people coming along for the ride with you, was that idea that a single touch from a ghost will kill you. Now, the thing with Lockwood, therefore, getting ghost touched and seemingly surviving it within the first 15 minutes of the series, I think fans of the books and the lore, like all of us on here, can intellectualize that and understand like the subtle differences. But presenting a show for an audience who you have to presume a lot of people are coming to it without that prior knowledge, it was about clarity. So that was a big piece of why we sort of eventually took it out for Lockwood. But there were other sort of things which may be more nuanced. So, for example, what we didn't have in our series was the sort of the span of time that takes place between the first book and the second book. We were running things through continually. And we knew that as that world's worst 10 days that the trio find themselves are in runs continuously, there was lots more fighting and physicality to come in the second half of the series. And to touch upon Rachel's point of wanting to treat every single thing in this show seriously and never let ourselves off the hook and skirt around something. If Lockwood was injured, we wanted him to carry that injury all the way throughout the series. So it suddenly became a bit tricky to imagine how he was going to be fighting with the golden blade and leaping from successive many rooftops as he enjoys doing, whilst also sticking to that golden rule that we had for ourselves. So there were a number of things like that which all factored into the decision. As for other things that were filmed and sort of didn't make it in, I mean, there were all sorts of things. There was one, I forget exactly which episode it is, Rach. You might have to correct me, but I think it was your episode 5, Joy, where the trio come back from Bickerstaff's house, and there was a moment where Lucy has an argument with Skull in the kitchen. Switches his valve off and covers him over with a tea towel, which for various reasons, which I won't get into to save us time, sort of came out. There was an alternative opening at one point as well, which was more of a, I'd forgotten that, Rach, until I was thinking earlier, which was more of a, it didn't open on Lockwood and Lucy. It showed sort of hordes of people trying to get home on time before curfew and what have you. So all sorts of things. And it's one of the tropes, I think, out there about film and TV, this unfortunate phrasing, but the idea of like killing your darlings or killing your babies, of that you have to be prepared at times, if it's right for the overall story, to let things hit the floor of the cutting room. It's never easy, but yeah, you have to do it.
And just to realise sort of how much you were with those 3 characters and didn't need a lot of the extra stuff in a TV version. Like, we did several drafts of Bickerstaff's house where the Kipps gang were there, but just distilled until it really was about Lucy, Lockwood and George. It didn't need all those extra things. You could put it in a movie, but in a TV show, there was enough in the episode already, and it was just too much to service, really. So it was almost a distillation over the drafts, wasn't it, of going, we think we need all this, but actually we don't need all this.
Yeah. And we sort of did a similar thing. We had the wraiths at Wimbledon Common at the start of episode 4 for a long time in the script. And then he sort of came out for a number of reasons. But I mean, to get a bit techie about the sort of storytelling in episode 4 and to sort of touch on this sort of compression of time that we decided to go with in the adaptation that doesn't exist in the book. So we don't have the length of time that the books have between 1 and 2. So we leave off, episode 3 with Lucy being kind of poleaxed really by her first communication with the skull. And then we pick up episode 4 and no time has passed at all. And we worked really hard with Ed to figure out, okay, how are we going to communicate the impact that this interaction with the skull has had on Lucy? It needs to be like a profound moment for her in her sort of psychic journey. And what we found was that the main story of episode 4 is obviously the cemetery and discovery of Bickerstaff's body, right, and the ghost. And we really sort of wanted to tell the story of how Lucy was kind of remembering what had happened, flying my room, remembering what had happened with the skull. And what we found with the wraith is that, we were having to sort of repeat that thing. We couldn't ignore the fact that she'd had this interaction with Skull. So we were trying to tell that story through the wraith job and then starting again and telling the story through the cemetery. And so it just became obvious that the solution was we wanted to nod to the scene because it's such a kind of great moment in the books, but we just had it happen off screen and start with the boys coming home from that. Plus, expensive. And I mean, it's worth saying, I suppose, that what the books have to do every time is reintroduce the readers to the rules of play. So you find that Jonathan very cleverly does that pretty much at the start of each book, is give you a job and just remind you what the dynamics of the trio are and what the rules of engagement are. But the show didn't need to do that at the start of each episode, so that's why R.I.P. the Wraiths.
And that's right. And it's also, you then open yourself up to those kind of more serendipitous parts of production, which is that, for me, that hallway scene is one of my favorite bits of the series. I mean, Ali and Cameron, Ruby too, but Ali and Cameron are just like exceptional in that moment. They're so funny, and it gave us this opportunity for a moment of comedy that, by default becomes harder as you move into the second half of the series and the world becomes a little bit darker and more serious for them. So, we wouldn't have had that brilliant hallway scene were it not for the difficult decision to take it out. So, it's rough with the smooth, I think.
Yeah, that episode's much beloved.
Yes, and we wouldn't have the name for the whole event, Total Cluster Case. We got it from that scene because we loved it so much. It was absolutely hilarious. The delivery on that, it's like so beloved.
Yeah, that's really funny. The process of script editing, it sort of feels like when you're going on a holiday and you pull out all the things you're going to need, and then as you're packing, you're like, oh, there's no room for it. I'll have to, what do I really need? What are the essentials? So that's really interesting to think about. So our next question is for Joy, but again, I know you all worked as a team, so if you want to chime in, please do. So you wrote some of the most popular and moving scenes from the show, the toast scene, as it's come to be known, the Winkman's warehouse scene, the asset scene, key amongst them. So could you speak to the development of those scenes? And that question is from Hannah, one of our lead technician.
Yeah, of course. So in reverse order, the asset scene, I don't know whether you mean the scene in the kitchen where he calls her it, or whether it's when she has it out with him in Hyde Park, but the asset thing comes from the book, really, but what the bit that I loved and really sort of hung on to in the kitchen scene is where she's outside overhearing him afterwards, and that's sort of because I'm quite obsessed with Wuthering Heights, and there's this really big moment in Wuthering Heights where Heathcliff hears Kathy saying how she could never be with him, and then he goes before he hears the really important bit about how they're meant to be together forever. So I really wanted Lucy to have this moment where she just heard the wrong thing and read it the wrong way and went off, and then they have this total misunderstanding that kind of builds to her leaving and the confrontation in the park, which is like such a romantic scene, and I don't know, that's just the stuff I love writing, and for those characters and the tension between them and what they can't say to each other and how misunderstood Lockwood is in what he's trying to say, and you know, she's this sort of empath with all this feeling and he's all locked up. I don't know, like it just poured out really, and we did quite a bit of like finessing, but it was quite fully formed, that stuff really, unlike the Winkman's Warehouse, which in the book it's you forget what's not in the book. I was like, oh well, there is oh no, there's not. They go to his shop and it's quite a light fun scene that happens in the daytime, and it's quite sort of slapstick and fun, and that just didn't feel right for that point of the series. So I don't think we ever wrote that version. I think it was always going to be at nighttime after they'd been to visit Flo and the break-in. But even so, the early drafts of it were sort of more comedic and a bit lighter, and it just got darker and darker and darker, basically. And I think some of it came from when I grew up, there were a lot of shows on TV for young people where women got chloroformed, and that was sort of the most romantic thing you could do, was be sort of kidnapped and tied up and what have you. So I think there was something in me going, let's do that to Lockwood instead and have Lucy come and rescue him.
I love it.
Because isn't he beautiful, tied up to that chair and, you know, outside, and then her coming in and with the fire. So, but I think the thing that really makes it is beyond the script is when those characters were cast and the portrayal. I mean, it was on the page, but where they took it is just incredible with the characterization. I think it was sort of in conversations with Joe that we were like talking about him being this Mancunian, almost like a sort of rave casualty kind of guy, but then the actor really ran with that, and the level of almost like David Lynch style vamping he was doing with his machines. So that was one of those perfect examples of it just evolving at every point and becoming more and more what it's meant to be. And then finally the toast scene, which is just absolutely remarkable how people spotted it and picked up on it, and it's become this thing. So I looked back at the scripts, and it was obviously a note that I got between September the 28th and October the 1st, because it's not in the September the 28th draft, and it is in the October the 1st draft, and it must have been on a Zoom call, and I've sort of got a vague memory. We had these wonderful, really discursive note sessions with Rachel and Bradley where we'd throw lots of ideas around, and then I found this email from Rachel on October the 4th just saying, scene 21, might it help the nice new toast beat along if Flo starts the scene sitting down with her mug of tea? Might be easier for her to play the observation idea here. So it was obviously like we'd kind of cooked it up, and it was in the script then. And then we were just evolving it from there. So these things don't ever really come about by accident on set, not very often. Like to actually capture that moment and film it, you have to have it in your shot list, and it's going to happen.
I remember, Joy, that we had to make sure that we were getting that, because I remember when we were talking about it, what we wanted to do was track Flo, who knows, you know, Lockwood. Like our feeling was that she was one of the few characters that know Lockwood from old, and one of the few characters that can call him on his bullshit. And so we wanted just a small moment, right, that she would notice that told her this person in his life was different.
Mhm.
There was a bond or a connection. So the idea was just to find something between them, non-verbal, that would just tip her off that something was going on. And so it's just that it's a small act of care, isn't it?
I know that someone said in the chat about like the sort of married vibes, and it's just reminded me that one of the things we kept on saying, Joy, for this episode was it was like a honeymoon. It was like the world's darkest honeymoon.
Yes, episode.
Yeah,
and episode 6 was the wedding, and then it all goes down from there.
Oh, yes, you've got a good memory. Yes, because they used to, again, like the Cold Maiden scene is one that got condensed, but in early drafts of that, they were kind of digging in the sand together like they were on their little honeymoon, not in Blackpool or something. So, yeah, it was the Mad Night honeymoon, of course.
It was, yeah.
Mudlarking is definitely a thing people do on honeymoons. I can see that, just with a Lockwood and Co twist, you know.
I
Absolutely.
mean, like everyone jokes that, you know, Lockwood already handed Lucy a ring in episode 2, that whole, like everything, you know, the whole process from the very beginning, even the opening scene, like I would say personally, what hooked me was like the banter in the opening scene that gave married vibes. So like and when it comes to the toast scene, I think I personally missed it the first time around, because there's so much to notice in that scene. Like the shots are very dynamic, and then there's Jonathan in that scene, and then it's like, are you looking at Jonathan? Are you noticing the toast? It's like just so much going on, and it was just so much fun. And I think based on what you said, that like, you know, the whole episode, it kept getting darker and darker. It's a very dark honeymoon scene. So so the show manages to really emphasize the human element of all the suffering, you know, caused by the problem, you know, the lasting effect of trauma and anxiety, grief, PTSD, all of these things. So what was the inspiration behind the emphasis, and how did you go about developing it? And this question is by Vishal Stew. I think she is on Instagram.
Well, just to jump in, I'm sure everyone's got their own things they can contribute to this. Not to repeat an earlier answer, but you know, we had this mantra of honoring and telling the truth, and I don't know, sometimes you can watch shows that are in a sort of supernatural fantasy space, and they can be really enjoyable, but there is a feeling of some kind of distance between you and the characters and what's going on in the world. And that's perhaps because the storytelling or the characters being treated in such a way that like doesn't completely feel realistic. Those shows can still be really enjoyable, but it was so important to us that the audience would sort of immerse themselves in the reality of what was going on. And you know, I think the interesting thing about, you know, Joe being so drawn to this material, and what he and Jonathan sort of have in common in a way, is that, you know, Joe's certainly always drawn to material that, you know, he loves genre and he loves high concept, but everything that he does, he really wants it to be about something. And I knew when I first read Jonathan's book that would be a key part of what would probably appeal to Joe about the material. And so it was always the case that we were going to honor what these young people were going through. We knew that the sort of core audience for this, although, you know, it's a show that was designed for a wide audience, but we knew that, you know, the core audience was young people. We all know, I mean, it doesn't even matter if you're a young person, it's pretty tough being alive in 2023. There's a lot going on. There was no different in 2020. And we just wanted to feel that the audience could find kinship with the characters, could see themselves in various aspects, no matter what you were going through or had been through or feared you might go through, that you would find it in pockets throughout the show, reflected in characters and scenes. We just never wanted to be flippant about that, and because the books aren't, and the books are soulful, and the books are really emotional, and we wanted that to be a sort of strong, resonant, you know, theme throughout the whole show. And I've got to say, that's one of the aspects of it that I'm really proud of, and I think the cast did a phenomenal job in empathizing with those characters and bringing all that vulnerability to the screen. Not easy for young actors, and particularly, with Cameron on his first job. That's a really tall order, but they really put it all out there, and I'm so grateful for what they gave to the performances.
That's right. And the only thing I'd sort of add on top of that is, I think it's probably fair to say that as a group of people, we're quite like in our feelings. We would spend a lot of time in those note sessions just talking about what the characters feel, but so often, I think this is fair to say, we sort of took a really Rach, we spoke about this a lot, about how like powerful vulnerability was in the journey of like developing and writing and creating this show. That like all the key people involved needed to be prepared to be a little bit vulnerable, because you have to bring those elements of yourself to talk with any authority about the sort of emotion at the heart of these characters. So we were very comfortable sort of going to those places, I think. And also I think another thing we have in common, or anyway, I speak for myself, that one of my least favorite things in sort of films and TV shows is when you can sort of feel when maybe the sort of team behind it or the show itself wants to put like a layer of irony or cynicism between itself and the emotion. And we were just like, no way, we're just going to let all of those emotions be worn on sleeves and be sort of proud of them. And then just to touch on specifically the sort of grief aspect of it, I just started thinking about Lockwood and how one of the opportunities of the show, obviously Jonathan's books are written from Lucy's perspective, and she sort of narrates the story to us. But by having that opportunity to share perspective in our show, it meant that we could pick up on some of the moments which are the most profound for me in the series, like, sort of Lockwood on the stairway with his head on Jessica's door, which you never get to, it's felt in the books, but we just had a real opportunity, I think, by being able to share the perspective, to really sit with those characters, to sort of observe the whole range of emotions that they were having.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so there in Jonathan's core idea that they don't even have to talk about it. And actually, it's part of almost the Blitz spirit that they don't talk about it. Just have these light touches. Like there's the moment that jumped out in the book and in that first episode where Mrs. Hope at the house at the beginning just says about feeling sorry for young people today, and it just points to the bigger issue that it's all about, but that's all it does. And the rest of it, the kids aren't going around talking about how they feel, it's all buried underneath. And particularly like in that moment, I really love where Lucy says to Lockwood, you can tell me how you feel, and he just goes, I know.
That moment, I just love but it's all under the surface. Yeah. I think that's it. And I won't go on forever, but I just to echo what Brad was saying, is that we were very fortunate, and it was honestly one of the best jobs of my career to sort of work on this show with such an incredible team of people. And we did have an incredible bond of trust within the sort of writing and the writer's room, and that, as Brad was saying, we talked a lot about things that had affected us in our lives, things that we had gone through that we felt were a comp for what various characters were going through. And, by sharing those things in a writer's room, finding a way to sort of iterate them within scenes, that's not always about dialogue. And quite often the best versions of dramatizing those things are non-dialogue. We were just very lucky with our incredible writers, such sensitivity, so in touch with their emotions, and so just determined to sort of, do their best work. So I think it was always a given we were going to do that. It's why we loved the books. But yeah, it's just even thinking about how much we talked about George as well, and just the impact of the bone glass, and just really want to talk about what happens to a character who's so sort of driven and sure of his science, if you like, and his sort of, it's not that he thinks he's invulnerable, but nothing like that has ever happened to him before. And we just really wanted to show how that shook the foundation of his character. And we talked about lots of comps for what that might be for a young man of George's age in a non-supernatural universe, and try to transplant those ideas into how he felt in the aftermath of, I guess, sort of being so overpowered by this unbelievable force of not goodness.
Yeah, the sheer emotionality of the work is, I think, what really resonates with all of us, because we also, as a community, are very emotional people. So it's good to say. I think that's why we feel a certain kinship with you all in your work. Yeah, no, sorry, I was very moved by that. That was beautiful. And sort of related. So there are a lot of themes of pandemic life. You know, I mean, you filmed during the pandemic for a lot of it. There are many themes of pandemic life that do seem to align with life during the problem. Could you talk a bit just about some of the challenges of filming during the pandemic? And, you know, did you perceive any parallels at the time between the world we were living in and the world that Lockwood and Co are living in?
Well, I think, Jonathan, I want you to talk a bit about the challenges of shooting in the pandemic, because one of the biggest challenges was how difficult it was to get you and your family to set, and just what a big deal it was when we finally got you there.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I think how difficult it is to make a show in the first place, but then to do it all in the middle of a sort of unprecedented pandemic is just extraordinary. And I saw that from the folks from minute perspective, because yeah, we were trying to get on set to for the first time to actually see what was going on. And in order to do that, we as a family had to come down to Ealing Studios a few days before to do our COVID tests, then go away again, and then wait to hear whether we had COVID. If we didn't, that was fine. So then we were allowed to come to where you guys were shooting. Was it Minley Manor, south of London? So we pitched up again, and then straight away we had to do more tests, and you were kind of on the spot just to double check whether anything happened, and then you were allowed in. But the fact that you guys had to, on a daily basis, everybody who was involved had to have the tests, and if they didn't, if anything happened, then presumably everything was stopped or shut down. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary level of difficulty that you were jumping through just to get people into the correct location in the morning, and that's before you had to sort of do all the intimate scenes and you had to maneuver things around. So it was not fun, but I feel like, you know, every show and film that was shooting at that time had the same challenges. So not to sort of woe is me, so you can just apply this to everybody. But you know, even, you know, it got better as the shoot went on. It got a little bit more relaxed, but you know, you weren't able to have, it was really tight who we could have on set and who we couldn't. The impact, it was vast, I have to say. It was everything from just not being able to high five or hug someone when they'd done an amazing job, or even just approach if you weren't in the right, if you were in a different zoned color. We all had, in the early stages of the shoot, we were all different colored tags. You couldn't talk to anyone that wasn't in your color zone. I think I'm right in saying, Brad, that the Barbican where we were shooting Joy's episode 6, the Fits at 50 ball, we lost our shoot time in that location, I think 3 times due to COVID, because such a huge extra scene. So then you've got not just your core cast and crew that need to all be COVID free, but you need that to not be popping up within your extras as well. So at times, we were compromised. The vision was certainly compromised, and I mean, I think the scene is still phenomenal. But what Joy had written for that party, and the escape that Lucy and Lockwood make after the Black Library theft was a lot bigger number, and it didn't, and we had fought so hard, right, Joy, for
our salt sprinklers. We had such a vision for these salt sprinklers, which were not a cheap thing to sort of persuade our brilliant producers to part with money for, and the vision was very much for a kind of feeling of salt confetti and the chaos of running through the party. We didn't get everything that we wanted there, which still makes me a little bit sad, because we'd just gone in and then we'd had to sort of shut down production because of COVID. So that happened in just endlessly. You just lose time, and you lose locations, and things get compromised. But hopefully you wouldn't know it from the final show. That's just stuff that we on the inside have to live with.
No.
But just say that Brad is in that ballroom scene.
Oh yeah,
if anybody wants to try and spot him near Penelope Finn.
Yes. But
Lock Nation Twitter is working on it right now, I assure you,
Oh, no,
now
no,
that you've said it.
Very easy to spot.
We've noticed before.
Yeah.
Lock Nation Twitter has definitely noticed. And I think this is something that I do want to compliment you all on, is that one of the things you notice about the show, even like the first episode when Lucy is going, like she's first in London, there's so many extras. You don't really feel that the show was filmed during COVID. And I do want to say that, like, the ball scene, the Fitz ball scene, that escape, it's so magical. That is one scene where you really see how youthful Lucy and Lockwood both are, just how they're just teenagers, and I think however you guys intended it, we received the message. It was just so beautiful. It's one of the best scenes ever. We just love it so much. So in that same sort of related, because it comes down to the cast as well, because you're working with these amazing actors who are so expressive, especially with all those micro expressions for all these emotions, the difficult, the youthful, the grief, the trauma, and then just those moments of comedy where they're just laughing and they're just being teenagers. So we've heard in previous interviews that Cameron was the last one cast, and the chemistry read stage was really, really integral to, finding that final trio, that final, package of the Iron Trio. So can you tell us a little bit about that final selection process and how you knew you found the right Lucy, Lockwood, and George?
Oh, I'd love to tell you about that. And I would love to tell you about the moment that I sent the final chemistry read to Jonathan, and where I was when I picked up his voicemail and my heart was in my mouth. So I'll just backtrack a little bit. Actually, what we had, I think there's been a lot of interview online about the casting process itself. So I think I won't repeat that, but I will talk about finally getting to Cameron, because at one point we really thought we were going to have to push the shoot because we didn't think we'd found our Lockwood and we didn't want to compromise. And I will just say one of the brilliant but really annoying things that Jonathan did is write it so sort of specific characters, which is why they're so amazing. But boy, oh boy, does that make casting hard, because you're casting young people and what they aren't playing is a teenager just in 2020 or 2021. They're not playing themselves. They're playing these intensely saturated characters. And I think the thing about Lockwood in particular is that he has this kind of in really precise confidence that treads this line between annoying swagger but he's not smarmy, right? So it's that thing of having charisma and being someone that, like in the cemetery scene, George and Lucy do roll their eyes when he's giving out his big speech, but he stays right on the line of being lovable. And we saw some amazing actors, but you'd be so surprised how hard that line is to tread. Like Cameron just did a phenomenal job of it. It's just like, I mean, I could go on forever about that, but that's why I think Lockwood in particular was so hard to cast, because that kind of confidence in a young person in front of auditioning in front of a bunch of producers, that's really, really hard to pull off. But I remember when we sort of knew for sure we got it right, we actually filmed with half costume, a sort of a scene between the three of them. And it's actually one of the scenes that was cut from the script. It was a scene that was at the beginning of episode 3, which ended up starting very much on the ring and the examination of the ring, and then deducing the clues from it. But originally, I think it was a bit closer to the book. It was a sort of breakfast scene, and George was making eggs, and Lockwood was reading the newspaper, and Lucy was just narky and annoyed. And I remember that we had them sat on 3 chairs, and Cameron was reading a newspaper, George had a sort of mixing bowl, right? He was scrambling his eggs, and Lucy was in the middle, just being really sort of annoyed. And you could just see it wasn't just the way that they interacted with each other, which was just like gave us all goosebumps, but it was also just what they looked like. It was just them. And I remember sending it to Jonathan with my heart in my mouth, thinking, what if he doesn't like them? What if he doesn't think they're right? And I was actually at my mum's house, and I got this voice message from Jonathan. Suffice to say, he felt exactly like we did, and I just was crying. My mum was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, the author really likes the cast. But do you remember that, Jonathan?
I remember. No, I remember it really, really clearly, because I was so frightened when I.
You were terrified.
Because for ages I'd been there, kind of, you still haven't got a Lockwood, and when's it going to happen? I can't wait. And eventually, suddenly I got your email. Oh, yeah, we think we've got them, and here they are for you. And just press this button, and you will see them. And I can remember my hand was sort of shaking as I went to press the button. I thought, what would happen if I pressed it and they had some big blonde bloke playing Lockwood, and it would just be that moment where you just go, oh no. But yeah, it was just a thing of absolute perfection, exactly as you said, Rachel. You could just see the 3 of them. They were just in the characters. You were in the room with them. You didn't need anything else. It was really quite a special moment.
Is there I think I'm just going to go ahead and have a little audacity and ask something that Twitter is going to definitely be asking you, but is there any way we can see that video of that chemistry read?
We can't really know. I mean, I don't think it's really fair on the actors to sort of release that footage, but I think also, I don't know, I think that would be down to sort of Netflix, maybe. So sadly, I think probably not. Oh, I don't want to be
understandable. No, it's completely understandable.
But you can imagine it.
Yeah, we can definitely imagine. We've got 8 episodes. We've got 8 whole episodes. They're absolutely perfect. And so since I mentioned Twitter, so what do you think about all the Lock Nation Twitter lore? Everyone has created all these stories, these background characters. And for example, there's Adam Bunchurch II. Bunchurch the First is mentioned in the books. We have that character of our own now. And then there's an anti-D. Pratt McDonald's. It's just a whole lot of chaos, but it's fun chaos. So what's it like to have, such a vast community creating more from what you've already created?
Jonathan, I think you should answer that first and foremost.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in the last interview we talked about it a little bit, that there's such a it's really just an extension of what you guys sitting here today have done. That the initial sort of act of creation was me sitting here, sort of scratching my armpits and writing a on my own in a darkened room for several years, and then finally putting it into the world. And you guys have taken it and made something extraordinary with it, expanding it and sort of keeping the essence, as Joy said at the beginning, keeping the essence of the characters and the world. And what I wouldn't have predicted was the way that then all the guys you guys in Lock Nation have been able to sort of continue the same process by the ripples continue to go outwards, and the essence remains the same, that the ideas of friendship and love and honor and sort of sacrifice that we played with. You guys are taking it further and spreading it to all 4 corners of the world. So it's a very special thing to watch it happen.
It is. It's amazing, and I think everyone is hilarious and brilliant and so imaginative. But I genuinely think this, that, you know, you asked a question earlier about sort of how we sort of knew how to, like, you talked about very nicely about how we'd manage the adaptation, and I talked a bit about extrapolation from core DNA of what Jonathan had created, so that gets expanded in the show. But really all the fandom are doing is the same thing. It is just running with notions, themes, tone, sense of humor, and just building that world out even further. And of course, sometimes it's silly, which is joyous. But in the same way as we would always know if it was right or wrong, I think you all seem to instinctively know a joke only kind of escalates, or a made up character only escalates on social media if it hits some really essential theme of what Lockwood and Co is about. So it's like you're all caretakers of this thing that Jonathan created, that we expanded out for the show, and now it's just develops further on social media. I gotta say, it's a nice feeling, I would say, right, Joy, Brad, Jonathan?
Yeah, and I like making a show like this it's a real marathon, not a sprint. And sort of, as I was saying earlier, you try and enjoy each moment that you're in. But certainly, as after we finished production and we'd finished filming and we were editing, and at that point we're sort of however many years into the process, and it's amazing and it's the best thing ever, but it's also exhausting. And I can't tell you how entertained and energized the sort of core Lock Nation fandom, even before the show came out, kept us, because we would see all those memes on Tumblr and online, and we would share them with each other in the office, and we were on little WhatsApp groups with Joy and Ed, and we'd be constantly passing them back and forth. And I think those were the sort of the real things that I think push you on and give you the energy to carry on, because you realize you're making this thing which is like so beloved and so awaited. So, you know, I would like to say thank you to everybody for just the endless creativity, but the love that you sort of lavished on the show, both before it came out and since it came out, because it really it went an enormous way to keep us going when we're several years into the process and hadn't seen our families and friends and all the rest of it, you know. So thank you.
We thank you for your sacrifice. And so you are sacrificing a lot of your time, and it seems like, you know, we might be going a bit over. So let's just quickly get into the fan questions portion of the event. So our first fan who's going to be asking a question is Evie, who is Bun Church's legal counsel, actually. So let's just have Evie ask her question.
Hi.
Hi.
It's nice to, or it's an honor to have an opportunity to ask this question. I'm a big fan of all of the art that all of you have made, Lockwood and Co and beyond. So to jump into my question, labor rights are a major but subtextual topic in both the books and the show. And the question is, were you inspired by any current or historical events when you were working on kind of bringing that to the forefront and developing those themes, especially with regards to the power dynamics that exist between children and adults in the world of the series? Thank you. And that's for everyone or anyone.
Well, I'll jump in a bit because I kind of wish that Joe, who is on holiday, well-deserved this week and next, I slightly sort of feel like I want to speak for him a bit on this, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier about what inspires him about original material he creates himself, and if he sort of, material he's drawn to for adaptation. I don't think there was any sort of specifics, although I know some things came up in the sort of in the discussion of how we would dramatize things, the slight age tweaks we made from the books to the show. But I don't know if this is answering your question exactly, but one thing we talked endlessly about was our sort of, I have two teenagers myself. One's almost not a teenager anymore, but the frustration that we have in general with that this sort of tendency in society for the problems that older generations to create being sort of thrust upon a younger generation to have to resolve and figure out the answers to, which is obviously, profoundly dysfunctional and really unfair, and causes massive mental health issues, within the younger generation. And I suppose we talked about climate change and the sort of fear that sort of, my generation, it was nuclear war, but I think climate is this generation's, rightly major concern. And it's the sort of thing that I think keeps people awake at night, and the fear of how we're going to sort of solve those problems. It just feels like something that is so squarely being kicked down to a younger generation. And we just found certainly parallels in what Jonathan had created with that particular issue, which is not a labor law issue, so it doesn't completely answer your question, Evie, but we were interested in showing the toll that it takes on young people when you basically say, this is a major life-threatening problem, it's on your shoulders, good luck, go out, figure it out. So we talked about that a lot, perhaps more so than specific labor laws, but yes.
I think sort of Brad and Rachel and myself and Ed in particular, we come from places that mean that the stories that we want to tell are very much about sort of outsiders taking on the system, bringing it down, and so that's intrinsic to that we don't have to sort of consciously do that. That's the story that comes out, and that's what resonated with this little outsider agency that has to take on the big corporations, and Ed's very political, so it's just not going to come out any other way than being about taking on those big forces in a David and Goliath kind of way.
Yeah, I think that's right. I hadn't really thought about those things that a lot of us have in common. But you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Thank you so much for that. I think that answered a lot of my question. And I also want to say I work my job professionally. I try to fight large corporations. So I appreciate the narrative that you guys have put into the world that I think really inspired me when times are bleak. So thank you.
Great. Well, keep doing what you're doing, Evie.
Thank you, Evie.
Bye.
All right, our next question is from Cassidy.
Hi, Cassidy.
Hi, Cassidy.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm Cassidy, joining in from Chicago in the United States.
So
I'm
glamorous.
so glad to see all of you. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for giving your time, the gift of your time to be with us, and for creating such a meaningful, life-changing story that we all get to join together on in appreciating and delving into. It's such a gift to get to celebrate these stories with all of you. So thank you. My question has to do with some of the writing. What are some of the ways the various writers on this show worked together to ensure consistency of character, tone, etc. across all of the scripts?
Joy, you should speak about that, I think.
Well, I worked with Ed before on Doctor Who, and we sort of go way back to theatre. That was purely coincidental, and Rachel didn't know that when she hired us, but we're actually sort of very different writers, I think, but kind of complementary. And I could never write like he does, and vice versa. And then Joe has also got his very own tone. So it's not that we all write the same tone, it's something complementary about it, and it's a bit like Lockwood and Co in its way, that there's almost the sort of George in there and the Lucy and the Lockwood. So then it's down to Bradley and Rachel to sort of see what needs sort of like the graphic equalizers going up and down across the series, but I think, I don't know, can you talk, because I think we are quite different, but somehow we're all in the same world.
Yes, I think that's a really good way to put it, the graphic equalizer. I mean, I sort of remember at the start of the process going, developing television is mad. It's like episodic television anyway. It's like that game you do as a kid where someone draws a head and then you fold the piece of paper over and someone draws the arms, and it's just like you can't see. And often, you know, writers are writing in isolation. Episode 4, what happens in episode 3? Who knows? Well, we know broadly what happens, but we don't really know it, you know, texturally what's happening in the episode. I think one of the things that we were able to do, it's quite a close-knit team on this, we did revisit writers' rooms across the process. So we would be going out and writing and calibrating, and then we would come back in and share the time that we had, because of the COVID delay, gave us that ability to come back to the room and share, read, and sort of perhaps hold the show in our collective heads a bit more soundly than might otherwise have been the case. But I mean, it's just going to be stuck record stuff. I think it is that thing, is when we first sat down in the room and talked about what we loved about it, it was such a sort of, no one was there on a job. No one was there to get just paid. Everybody was passionate, and that we were so lucky, and that was so in evidence in the first writers' room. And I think that the journey that the show went on was definitely a journey from being like, I think the first scripts were probably felt a little bit younger, and they probably felt a little bit more comedic, and the process was really kind of development was finding not wanting to lose that spirit of what's in the books, but ensure that the show, given the budget level and where it was going out, was going to play to the widest possible audience and not feel like it was just for a younger audience, basically. I think it's just, we're very lucky, you know. Yes, you're very different writers, but you're all really sophisticated and intuitive writers. So if we asked for a dial up or a dial down here, you're capable of doing it. So that's the best answer I can give. Brad, anything more to add to that?
No, I think you both really covered it. I think that it goes back to that fact of being so close knit, and I think you also, although you were very different writers, I think you were fans of each other. Like, I'm talking about you and Ed in particular. So you had that amazing quality of being sort of excited and inspired by what the other person was doing, and then feeling pleased to take that baton and then make it your own. And there was a real sense of teamwork, to be honest. And as much as possible, we tried to avoid that. Well, we didn't even have to try. It just happened. It was never siloed. And, you know, I think any attempt to sort of apply logic onto that retrospectively would just be claiming credit where credit's not due. I think it felt like it happened so organically.
It's good to have those different perspectives on it, isn't it? Because if somebody's doing their big thing here, and I'm obsessed with Lucy, and I go, oh, but you can't do that to Lucy. And then they go, oh, yes, of course, thanks for keeping an eye on that. And we'll just, you know, have all these.
You basically are Lucy Joy.
Yeah.
But then, you know, like Ed in Ep 7 creating that whole story with Cutter and doing the, you know, for him to sort of take ownership of that and go, I'll bring my story to this. I think it was this really beautiful mix of having the books there, so we all have this thing that we love and can build on, but having our own perspectives on it too.
I think that's right, and the other thing is, I really understand the sort of where the question comes from, because if I sort of reflect back on when I first started working with Rachel about 7 years ago, something like that, it was my first real job in script development, and I sort of went into it thinking I was about to get given all the answers and like the secret to how one develops a script and how you do all of those things you're asking about, and I thought, great, someone's going to tell me now. And the truth is, no one quite knows for sure. There are things you pick up along the way, but there's always something sort of slightly alchemical about it. And it's a real iterative process that you just discover together as you go. And it's like you chip away a little bit, you add a little bit each time, and hopefully it gets a little bit better each time. And I think that one of the sort of metaphors I always think about it in my head is, let's say there are 10 drafts of something. In a way, sometimes draft 1 and draft 10 can almost feel like they bear no resemblance to one another. but every draft in between has some sort of solid link to the one before it. So you end up in this completely different place, and you can only actually get there by like trusting the process and just stepping through it bit by bit. And Joy and Ed were just like the absolute best collaborators for that. So we were very lucky.
Thank you, Catherine.
I think your secret was having lots of cake, because when on the day when I came into the writer's room right at the beginning, I was staggered by this vast array of George-like cakes and pastries and cups of tea and coffee. It's all piled up, and I imagine that sort of smoothed it out. You know, you all there.
Oh, how much I baked! I baked a lot.
That was all Rachel. Yeah, that was all Rachel.
Cake was the secret.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Catherine.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.
Thank you.
Our next question is going to be from Eduarda.
So, hi guys.
Hi.
Hello.
I am Eduarda from New York City, and I'm so excited to be here. And I only say I'm meeting Lockwood and Co because of the show, and after I go read the books, and I love so much this university, and now it's amazing. And I have two questions for everyone. And the first one is, can you tell us more about the process of choosing the cast? And the second one is, how do you feel meet them for the first time?
So the question, I think, is how did the casting process go, and then how did we feel when we met them in person for the first time? Is that correct? Okay. So the casting process was long and frustrating because it was all online. So frustrating for the actors, frustrating for us because you're not seeing anyone in person until really far down the process. I just remember endlessly sitting on Zooms with Brad and with John, with Joe, and with Naya Park, and with James Biddle, our producer, and talking through all these. I just have visions of all these, like we're on here now, all these little squares videos. There was a lot of watching of little self-tapes, incredible passion and commitment that everybody who auditioned did in such trying circumstances. Really, really touching to see the ways in which all these young people had thrown themselves into the process. I think it's on record that, you know, I sometimes think when we talk about casting Ruby, we skip over a bit because it did happen so quickly. She was literally like, I think like the seventh audition tape that I watched, and I can just visualize where she was on this grid of tapes. And but staggering that she was just so immediately Lucy. And it's just like, of course we watched everybody, but we just never really wavered on her. Once you'd watched her, it was so apparent that she was our Lucy. There was a just extraordinary conviction. She just made me believe. She was doing the interview scene, and you just believed her completely. And then, you know, George took a long time to find, and one of the things that is tricky we found about casting George is that he's an incredibly bright character, and therefore he has these huge chunks of dialogue, and both in the book and in the show, where he has to sort of explain quite complex ideas or theories to the audience, and he has to explain them in a way that is completely compelling and interesting. And what we realize, is no surprise that Ali is such a brain box in real life, because I think you actually needed an actor that was that intelligent to be able to sort of infuse George's dialogue with that sort of vibrancy. Like, no, it's really fascinating because, and Ali was able to do that in a way that, you know, some incredible actors just really found those kind of bigger chunks of George dialogue a bit of a struggle, really. And Ali just, he just took it in his stride. So once we'd seen his first audition, it was pretty immediate after that we felt that he would work. And then, sorry, I'm hogging the chatting, but just to, you know.
Well, I'll jump in on when we first met them then, because we had this rehearsal space next to Ealing Studio in an enormous building called CP House. And it was odd. It was like some strange liminal space, because it was a whole floor of a big office building, like so many floors up in the sky. It felt really strange in there. There was just nothing in there. And I remember I sort of went in that day. It was the first time meeting the three of them all together. And the task that day was that we had all these different colored pens and all these sort of whiteboards and flip charts. And they were just writing down all the words that came to mind when they thought about their characters. And we had this huge, like 4 or 5 hours just talking about character back and forth. But I think, I mean, I could tell stories about all of them, but just Rach, because you were talking about Ali, the thing that I think sums Ali up as a person is that on the first thing I ever said to him when I saw him was, I really like your t-shirt. And he was wearing a Jaws t-shirt, the movie Jaws. And he was like, oh, thanks, man. And then on the very last day of filming Lockwood and Co, he gave me a present, and he bought me a t-shirt, the same t-shirt, which I think sums him up completely. He's just the most thoughtful, like sweetest, kindest person. And they all are in their own way. So I think the first meetings, to me at least, immediately, it was a great moment, because not only did we know through their audition tapes that we'd found the right actors for those roles, I could also tell that we'd found the right people for the show.
Yeah, and they became such fast, firm friends. It was uncanny. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So much beautiful and so much cute, so much. Amazing. Thank you so much for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Lovely. All right, we've got 2 left. I'm sorry, but keep with us. So the next we have Deb.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
So my name's Deborah Shad. I am in Pennsylvania in the United States. And I wanted to thank each one of you for taking Jonathan's precious books and holding them in your hands and taking care of them in such a way that we all felt that this is like one of the best book adaptations. I mean, we talk about it quite often, but we talked about it, I think, in several panels, but the fact that you could take it, change it, tweak it, and it still felt real and true to the story is I think why we all love it so much. My question is, what is your favorite moment from your involvement in the series, whether on screen or off?
Such a good question.
I'll go first.
Go on, you go first.
I'm going to jump in because it comes to mind straight away. I mean, I would. Okay, the tweak being it was a favorite, because it'd be hard to pick the favorite, but I think one of them, and I feel bad now because I might be stealing Jonathan's story, but I was lucky enough to be there when Jonathan got to walk around the set of Portland Row for the first time, and it had not long been constructed in our studio space in Ealing, and we just had the most amazing team putting that space together. And I certainly felt like it reflected exactly how I'd imagined it in my mind when I'd read the books. And yeah, I think getting that moment for myself, but also getting to see sort of Jonathan have that moment was incredibly special.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a very profound day for me as well, because not only did I walk into Portland Row for the first time, but I also earlier that day had met Ruby and Cameron for the first time. So I'd met Lucy, I'd met Lockwood. Ali wasn't on set that day, so I had that pleasure deferred until we filmed the scene on in the cafe a little while later. But that particular moment walking into the house, it's very hard to express it actually, because obviously you see Portland Row. I saw it in my head very, very clearly as I was writing the books. I was looking in my notebooks, and I think I did do a few little sketches of how the rooms fit together, but essentially it was done sort of quite intuitively, and to actually walk into this immense construction and to see that it was really very, very, very close to what I saw in my head was just extraordinary, and the level of detail that Marcus Rowland and all the guys who put it together had gone to, so that you could see the unpaid bills that Lockwood had stuffed on the mantelpiece, and and actually, if you actually looked at the bill, it was a bill, and it was had a date and everything. So the actual level of detail was just insane. So it really was like being suddenly inside my book, and that was a wonderful experience. I'm very grateful to the team for giving me that, among many other things.
Joy, what's your favorite bit?
Oh God, do you know, I mean, the whole thing was just like the best job ever, and I loved I even loved getting notes and all of that. I think and uniqueness wise, I went on some of the location scouts and had this like amazing night walking down the river beaches with the stunt guys and the production designer, looking for where Flo's boat would be and where the Cold Maiden would be happening, and how that ghost might work, and the beautiful thing about how the people that Complete Fiction chooses to work with, who are all storytellers in their own expertise area, and that they're all bringing as much love to it as we did in that writer's room, as Jonathan did when he wrote the book. There was another moment where, to solve a problem, Rachel brought the set decorator in, who's this absolute character genius who you can just ask something of and they will say, oh well, what if she has this prop, and you just see the love that's happening at every single level of it. So those are the kind of off-screen ones, but I just like, having said in the toast conversation that like things don't happen that aren't planned for, one of the on-screen moments I like best is something that wasn't in the script, and actually probably annoyed me at the time when I saw the rushes, because I was like, oh, that wasn't in the script. And now because it's something that happened organically with those actors in character, I love it more than a lot of the other stuff. And it's the bit where they're escaping from Bickerstaff's house and they're just recovering in this kind of alleyway, and Lockwood holds Lucy's hand just for a moment, and I was like, oh no, that's too much, that's I'd never, but actually it's so much because he just rescued her from this situation, and his hand just goes there and holds it, and it's just never mentioned again and never pointed to, but I think it's just this beautiful bit of alchemy that we call.
Yeah, we've mentioned it a lot, I think.
Yeah. We know you did.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in and just mention a couple of things, like screen wise, that I love, and in particular I always get very emotional on the stairwell scene in episode 7 when Lockwood is going into sort of full panic attack, really dealing with what he believes that how his actions have sort of impacted Cutter and what he believes himself responsible for. And I just think the two of them in that stairwell are phenomenal. And there's a tiny bit of ADR in there because Cameron was so unbelievably brilliant that you couldn't quite hear exactly what he was saying. And I remember being so frustrated that we had to even ADR a tiny bit of it because it was just gave me goosebumps. So I always enjoy that bit. I mean, I love the bit in episode 5 that Joy's already referenced, where Lucy just demands of Lockwood that, she doesn't demand, she tells him, you can speak to me. And you can just see in that moment his complete and utter emotional dysfunction, his inability to meet her at her sort of the level of emotional intelligence that Lucy has. And I always think it's such a great sort of midpoint of series demonstration of their arc, of where he's got to get to by episode 8 if they're going to survive as a friendship or anything more than that. I think that's a great moment. And then just because we fought so hard for it, and how close we came to not even getting it is again in episode 7, the moment on the beach, after the jump, where maybe we play a little trick for a minute, like we think they're going to embrace, but Lucy sort of pushes Lockwood away from him, and I just love that moment so much. But I also love it because Netflix were amazing in giving us the additional money we needed to capture that, because we did not have it. And we all felt it was going to be so critical just to that bit of storytelling. She's not in the book, and we were never going to make Lucy that kind of pushover in the face of romance or a man. He behaved like an idiot. He deserved that shove and more. And I always find it just so satisfying when she does that. And I think the music over that is just brilliant. Yeah. And I just get goosebumps every time. Mm. There's a list of about 27, but we don't have time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so the last question that we have, thank you so much for all this extra time we're taking. It's by Ryman20 on Instagram.
Hi, my camera is off, so I don't know, call me a specter. But first of all, I wanted to say a quick shout out to Katie, who's one of my friends in the real world. So it's been really cool hearing her organizing all of this. And bonding over Lockwood and Co. Also, Jonathan, I bought a used copy of the whole series, but one particular copy was signed when I bought it, and it was like to some random person in 2013. And I think that's very cool. But my question is a very quick one. But I think that in the books, there's a lot of, important pieces, and then they, become physical and become realized in the show. So for all of you, what is like a favorite singular prop that sort of came to life and became physical in the show?
Well, I'll start off by saying I really annoy myself because on all the shows I work from, I never nick the props, and it really annoys me in retrospect. I'm always caught up when I'm on set, and then I'm like, I should have stolen that. If I could have had one, I'm a real sucker for a woodcut, and I think Bickerstaff's papers was so beautifully done, in that scene where they're pinned around Georgia's room, and they had to be so mysterious and so compelling, and it was quite a task. It's all right to write that in a couple of lines in a script, but for somebody to actually realize that on many, many pages of parchment and create that sense of mystery and lore, and I think they did an incredible job, and I would steal those if I had the chance.
Jonathan, what about you?
Well, I mean, you guys very, very kindly sent me a little package fairly recently, and I opened it up and was delighted to find that it had a Lockwood sign from outside his house, and that for me was the most the most perfect memento, because that's where it all began. It was kind of almost the first one of the very first bits that I wrote, the stand behind the iron line sign. So it was a very beautiful thing to have, and I have it downstairs, not actually outside my house, but just inside. So you can stand by the iron line there.
That just reminded me, I think on the first writer's room, Rachel or Bradley had written that on a piece of paper, then it was stuck on the door outside.
Yeah, that's right. We had on the door of the writer's room. Yeah.
It's been there all the way through.
Yeah. Brad, what about you?
It's a really good question, and there are so many. As Jonathan was saying earlier, you really could walk into a room and pick up anything, and it would be specific to that space. I really loved the Fitz manual, and sort of seeing that for the first time. Particularly the hero prop that Lucy and Norrie had signed. This will be us. Is such a thing. One of my favorite moments is episode 1, where Lucy is sitting on the edge of her bed in Portland Row, and she looks down on that amazing shot of Ruby looking down on the manual. And I also really liked the opportunity that there was just to have fun with the design of so Deepak, when they come into the house in at the top of episode 6, I think it is, and there's salt spraying the hallway. I really like the sort of techie, nerdy little things like that just remind me of, you know, being obsessed with films like The Goonies when I was younger, and just the enjoyment of those little contraptions. Yeah, those are some of mine.
Yeah. I think seeing the skull, I know he's not a prop, he's a person, but but seeing the jar and seeing it lit up for the first time, and just it feeling exactly how it had in my imagination was really exciting. And then I got to, I mean, I suppose it is, the kitchen itself was just like my obsession, my absolute obsession. I actually have here something that I stole from, oh no, is it showing? I stole this really peculiar jug that is a cottage from the kitchen, but it was full of stuff like that. We all know that because we've watched the show. There was such a sort of feeling of coziness in there. Everywhere you looked, there was just some beautifully chosen item like that contributed to this feeling of hearth and home and warmth and safety. And we talked a lot about that, you know, that table, that iconic table and cloth that Jonathan had created, that meeting place of hearts and minds. That kitchen was so integral to the feeling of the show. So to see what Marcus and his team had done with that I was really, really moved the first time I walked into that space. And also just seeing like the little nods that had been put in there for the tweaks we'd made to George's character and his heritage, and like those things that just, you might not even notice them, but we know they're there, and the actors know they're there. And yeah, I think it's hard to pick one prop. It's the accumulation of everything together, which just, yeah, gave us all chills really when we first stepped on those sets. But the kitchen for me is yeah, my favorite place.
And a big shout out to Lockwood socks, of course.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course, the sock. And to Naira Park, who chose the pink socks. She better get her name checked.
Yeah.
The socks, the rig, the nail polish, a lot of that was Naira, and she likes to hide in the background too much, but she extraordinary producer and partner, and just, yeah, responsible for so much of what you have all loved in the sort of look and feel of the show, has come from her amazing vision and working with a team of brilliant HODs across costume, makeup, and all the rest of it. So we got to give her a big shout out.
Yeah,
wonderful. We know who to thank for that then. That's good.
Yeah.
Like all those details you mentioned, like pink socks, the black nail polish, like you'd be surprised how often they come up in conversation. So thank you, Naira.
Yeah.
We absolutely love them. Okay, so segueing off from, you know, this props
Bye,
question.
Riley.
Thank you, Riley. So if anyone doesn't know yet, Complete Fiction Pictures have generously donated some memorabilia from the Lockwood and Co show to be raffled away randomly. And
yes, we have a
just
combined 12 items to give away to lucky fans, and these are items that CF donated. If you won, you'll receive one of the items. Hannah, are you able to show it? All right. All right, those were the winners. Congratulations, you all. So this thank you to Lock Nation for joining us, and enthusiastically, we can't even begin to describe the enthusiasm that people with this endeavor has been met with. So thank you all so much for that. And to our guests who so generously gave up their time to be here, even your extra time, we really appreciate it. Without our guests who created Lockwood & Co. in its various forms, this event wouldn't even exist. And without the support of this magnificent fandom, it certainly wouldn't have taken off. So thank you so much to everybody.
Oh no,
we just
I think we're all trying to jump in and just say thank you to you guys, because what an extraordinary effort. Putting something together like this is so much work. You've done it brilliantly. We've all loved being here. The fans, I'll get emotional. I'll get emotional, but we love you and thank you for such a, you've just made it all so worth it. It's an insane experience to make something that's met with so much love and like-mindedness. So we are forever grateful. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you so much. So we just wanted to say that in case, any of our audience are interested in any sort of merch or mementos from ClusterCon, then we invite you to reach out to Corveraz's Ink Made on Instagram. She made these amazing Type 3 ghost portraits for all of us. So we totally recommend checking her out. And then the amazing Portland Road living room background. It's by Miss Catwin, that's with 2 N's, also on Instagram, and you should definitely check out her video on the process of how she made that. She's going to be posting that soon. And unfortunately, all good things come to an end. This is really emotional for us too, Rachel, because it has been a very long process, and it's been so lovely getting to talk to all of you. But all good things do come to an end. So we would like to invite our attendees, we would like it if you guys would stay on just a little bit longer while we say goodbye to the attendees. And for the attendees, please remember to, make sure to pick up your rapiers at the door. And on the way home,
just reckless enough.
Yes, just stay just
I wanted Lockwood and Lucy and George to live in a house. They lived in their own house. It was their base, and it would be their home.
Literally for 10 years to the day, anytime I can't sleep, or I'm having a bad day, or things just seem really bad, I've pretended to be in this house, and everything just seemed okay again.
Portland Row's my home. You and George.
I'm looking at my home. Well, it's all of our home now.